Ethan moved carefully through the dense forest, his boots sinking slightly into the soft moss underfoot. The sky above was painted in shades of green and violet, the twin suns of this alien world casting long, strange shadows through the twisted trees. He paused, scanning the area with sharp eyes. After days of survival in this wild frontier, he had learned that caution could mean the difference between life and death. His mission had not been simple. He had been sent to explore uncharted territories for his home colony, mapping resources and scouting safe areas. But a sudden storm had forced his shuttle down, leaving him stranded far from civilization. Every day was a challenge, every step a test. Ethan stopped and knelt, checking one of the traps he had set earlier. He had been relying on these snares to catch small alien creatures for food. It was basic survival: trap, capture, cook, eat. But as he approached, his stomach tightened, not from hunger, but from something entirely unexpected. In the trap was not a small creature, nor an animal of any kind. It was a woman, but unlike any woman he had ever seen. Her eyes, golden and bright, glowed faintly in the dim light, and her ears were pointed, twitching nervously atop her head. A soft layer of fur covered her arms, and a long, bushy tail flicked behind her, moving with agitation. Her hair, silver and luminous, fell around her face, partially hiding the sharp, intelligent features of her face. Ethan froze, hardly believing what he was seeing. She struggled, trying to free herself, but the trap held fast. She hissed softly, the sound almost animal-like, and bared her teeth slightly. There was fear in her eyes, but also a wild defiance. I didn't mean to," Ethan began, raising his hands slowly, as if to show he posed no threat. I thought it was just an animal," the Vulpine woman. For that was what she was, Ethan realized, narrowed her eyes. She had clearly heard stories of humans before, or at least stories passed down in her clan about invaders and hunters who never spared those who crossed them. She expected cruelty, traps, pain. But Ethan simply looked uncertain, nervous, and strangely sincere. "Release me," she demanded, her voice a mix of command and caution. "I know what your kind does." Ethan shook his head. "I don't want to hurt you. I'll free you." He knelt beside the trap, his hands carefully working at the ropes and bindings. Her tail twitched rapidly, a sign of her agitation. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to escape before it was too late. But there was something in the way Ethan moved, careful, precise, almost gentle, that made her hesitate. She could sense he wasn't like the others. Finally, with a soft snap, the trap gave way, and Ethan quickly stepped back. "You're free," he said. The woman shot out of the trap, her body moving with speed and grace that seemed almost unnatural. She landed a few meters away, crouched low, tail flicking, ears on alert. She glared at Ethan, suspicion and anger warring with the faintest hint of curiosity. "Why didn't you?" she began, her words breaking off as she searched for an explanation. "I didn't want to hurt you," Ethan replied simply. "I thought you were an animal. I didn't know." For a long moment the forest was silent, except for the rustling of leaves and distant calls of alien creatures. The woman watched him, every muscle tense. Finally she spoke, her voice softer now, though still wary. Most humans would have. I don't even want to imagine what they would have done. Ethan nodded. "I know, I can't speak for all humans, but I'm not like that. I don't want to hurt anyone." Her ears twitched again. There was still fear, but something else was creeping in, a quiet curiosity. "Why should I believe you?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I guess you don't have to. But you're hurt. You'll need food, water, maybe even rest. I can offer that." The woman's eyes widened slightly. That was not what she expected. Humans, in her stories, only offered strength or death. They didn't offer help freely. Her suspicion was sharp, but hunger gnawed at her as well, as she could feel her leg aching from the trap's bite. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Fine, but don't try anything. One wrong move and I'll leave, or worse." Ethan smiled faintly. "Fair enough." He produced a small pack of dried food and a water container. The woman eyed it suspiciously, but, after a moment's hesitation, took a careful bite and sipped. The forest seemed to exhale around them, the tension easing slightly, as they sat by a small fire Ethan had prepared. He began to ask simple questions, careful not to push too hard. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she replied cautiously. "And yours?" "Ethan," he said. I never expected to meet anyone here. You're extraordinary." Lyra's tail flicked, a mixture of pride and caution. "I could say the same about you, human. You are different from what I expected." Night began to fall, and the two sat in uneasy silence. The forest was alive with strange sounds, distant howls, the rustle of wings, the subtle hum of the alien plants. Ethan watched Lyra carefully, noticing how her eyes caught every shadow, every movement. She was alert, a survivor, wary of anything that moved too quickly. He realized something important. He could not just see her as a curiosity or a stranger. She was intelligent, capable, and her reactions were shaped by a life of survival and caution. He respected that instinct, and in turn, he hoped she might see his own humanity reflected in his careful actions. Hours passed. Ethan offered more food, and Lyra slowly began to relax slightly. She still kept her distance, but she did not leave. Instead, she watched him, observing how he built the fire, how he moved through the forest with care. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice quieter, more reflective. "You didn't have to free me." "I did," Ethan said simply. "I couldn't leave someone trapped like that. It doesn't feel right." Lyra's ears twitched, and her tail moved slowly from side to side. She had expected cruelty, punishment, pain. Instead, she had found someone who acted differently. Someone who treated her not as a threat or a prize, but as a living being. For the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of trust toward a human. It was tentative, fragile, but it was there, and she didn't quite know what to do with it. Night deepened, and the two remained near the fire. Ethan kept watch, making sure the forest around them was safe, while Lyra slowly stretched her injured leg, testing her strength. Neither spoke for a long while, but the silence was not uncomfortable. It was a quiet understanding, an acknowledgement that both had been changed by the events of the day. Ethan realized that survival here was not just about food and water, but about connection, trust, and understanding. And Lyra realized that humans were not always the monsters her clan had warned her about. By the time the twin moons rose high, casting pale light over the forest, both felt a strange sense of companionship, cautious, careful, but real. And neither of them could ignore the quiet thought that perhaps by accident, they had found an unexpected ally in a world that offered very few. The fire burned low. The forest whispered its secrets, and both Ethan and Lyra knew that the events of this night would shape the days to come. Neither fully trusted the other yet, but the first step had been taken. A human had spared a Vulpine woman, and in doing so, had sparked a change neither could yet understand. Tomorrow, they would face more challenges. But tonight, there was a fragile peace, a beginning, and a realization that sometimes mistakes could lead to something far greater than either had expected. The morning light broke through the thick canopy of the alien forest, casting dappled patterns on the mossy ground. Ethan stirred first, his senses already alert to the sounds of the wild. The forest was alive with movement. The rustle of small creatures, the distant calls of winged animals, and the subtle hum of the plant life around them. Every sound mattered, and Ethan had learned to listen closely. Lyra remained still, crouched behind a tree, her amber eyes watching him closely. The night's events had left her cautious, yet a small part of her was curious. This human, the one who had captured her by accident but freed her instead, was unlike any she had known. He had not been cruel. He had not laughed at her or tried to dominate her, and somehow that unsettled her as much as it intrigued her. Ethan packed the remains of the fire carefully, making sure no smoke lingered to attract predators. He moved slowly, methodically, aware that Lyra's gaze followed him. He glanced over his shoulder. "We need to find water and more food," he he said gently. "And I want to make sure your leg is okay." Lyra flinched slightly at his words, but she did not speak. Instead, she watched him, her tail flicking with controlled tension. Her instincts told her to be wary. Humans in her clan stories were cunning, unpredictable, and often violent. Yet this human had not acted according to those stories. She followed him silently as he moved deeper into the forest. The terrain was difficult, roots snaked across the ground, and the alien plants occasionally released bursts of pollen that could make one dizzy if inhaled. Ethan navigated carefully, avoiding anything that might trip them. Finally, they reached a small stream, its water clear and cold. Ethan knelt by the edge, cupping the water in his hands. "Drink," he said simply, offering her a chance to refresh herself. Lyra approached cautiously, eyes scanning the surroundings. She sniffed the air and then bent down to drink. The water was cool, refreshing, and pure. For a moment, the tension eased. She realized that Ethan had not lied. He truly was helping her. "You trust easily?" Ethan remarked with a small smile. Noticing her hesitation, Lyra's ears twitched. "Trust is earned," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I do not trust easily human, especially not your kind." Ethan nodded, accepting her words. "Fair enough. I don't expect you to. I just want to survive like you. That's all." The two continued along the stream, moving quietly. Lyra stayed a few steps behind, observing Ethan's every move. She noted how he treated the plants, how he moved around obstacles, and how he remained vigilant. Despite her distrust, she felt a strange sense of admiration. He was careful, patient, and intelligent, all qualities her clan valued. Hours passed. Ethan caught small creatures for food, using traps he had set earlier, and shared them with Lyra. She ate slowly, watching him as he worked, and for the first time, she began to see that he was not just another human. He had a sense of honor, a respect for life, and a quiet determination that made him different from the humans in her clan's warnings. Yet, despite these observations, her distrust remained. She could not forget the stories of humans who had destroyed villages, enslaved people, or taken what they wanted without thought. Every gesture of kindness was measured against that history, as they rested by the stream. Lyra finally spoke, her voice quieter, almost hesitant. "Why didn't you hurt me last night? You could have—" Ethan looked at her, his expression serious. "Because it's not who I am. Hurting someone for no reason? That doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to survive at the cost of someone else's life." Her tail flicked slowly, a sign of internal conflict. "Words are easy," she said. "Actions. Actions are what matter. I will see if your actions match your words." Ethan nodded. "Then watch me. I don't want to trick you. I only want to survive, and maybe help you survive too." The tension between them remained, but it was different now. It was no longer simple fear or suspicion. It was cautious observation, a silent agreement to test each other's intentions. As they moved deeper into the forest, Ethan began to notice signs of other creatures' tracks in the soft earth, broken branches, and claw marks on tree trunks. Lyra's ears twitched constantly, and her body moved with fluid grace, avoiding potential danger. Ethan followed her lead, realizing that her instincts were far sharper than his own. By midday, they found a small clearing bathed in sunlight. Ethan suggested they rest, and Lyra finally agreed, though she stayed alert, her tail flicking nervously. "Your kind lives in villages, yes?" Ethan asked casually, trying to understand her background. "Yes," Lyra replied, "but my clan is small, isolated. We do not trust outsiders." "I can understand that," Ethan said. "I don't have a village. I was part of a colony. But now, I'm alone. It's dangerous to be alone out here." Lyra studied him, noting the honesty in his eyes. She began to see a pattern. He was not boastful. He did not exaggerate. He did not try to manipulate her. Everything about him suggested sincerity. Still, she remained cautious. "You are human. Humans are unpredictable. Even if you mean no harm, Others like you, they could be dangerous. I cannot forget that. Ethan nodded, respecting her caution. I don't want you to forget. I only want you to know that I'm different. The day passed slowly. Ethan caught more small creatures for food, and Lyra observed silently, occasionally offering guidance about which plants were safe and which were poisonous. She was impressed by his willingness to listen, by his patience and attention to detail. Slowly, the barrier between them began to shift. By evening, they reached another small stream. Ethan decided to set up a temporary shelter for the night. Lyra helped, showing him how to use natural materials to create a safe, camouflaged area. Her actions were careful and precise, and Ethan watched with respect. She was not only skilled, but she was also cautious, deliberate, and intelligent. As the fire crackled that night, Lyra finally allowed herself to speak more openly. You are not like the humans I feared, she admitted softly. I expected cruelty. I expected lies. But you are different, Ethan smiled faintly. Thank you. I know I cannot change what humans have done in the past, but I can be who I am, and I hope that matters. Lyra's ears twitched, and she looked down, her tail wrapping around her legs. For the first time, she felt something she had not experienced before, the beginning of trust. But trust was fragile, and she knew it. One wrong move, one mistake, and all of it could be lost. She kept her instincts sharp, but she allowed a small part of herself to hope that not all humans were cruel, that perhaps some could be allies, even friends. The night passed with cautious conversation, both learning about each other's lives and experiences. Lyra shared stories of her clan, of the forest, and of the dangers that lurked beyond. Ethan shared his own experiences as an explorer, his survival skills, and his determination to live with integrity. By the time the twin moons rose high above the canopy, both knew that the events of the day had changed something between them. The accidental capture, the fear, and the cautious interactions had created a fragile bond. It was not friendship yet, but it was a beginning, a small spark of understanding in a world that had been nothing but danger and mistrust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The forest was vast and unpredictable, filled with creatures both known and unknown. But for now, Ethan and Lyra sat together, watching the fire, listening to the forest, and recognizing that they had found in each other an unexpected companion in a wild, dangerous world. The night whispered around them, the forest alive with hidden life, and both understood that this was only the start. The trust between them, however small, would guide the days ahead if they could survive long enough to see them. The forest was quiet, almost deceptively so. Ethan and Lyra moved cautiously along a narrow path between tall, alien trees whose leaves shimmered faintly in the light of the twin suns. The day had started like any other, but the air carried a sense of tension, a subtle warning that something was coming. Ethan noticed it immediately, the way the birds, or bird-like creatures, flew silently overhead, and how Lyra's ears twitched in constant alert. You're very aware of everything around us, Ethan said quietly. Not wanting to startle her, Lyra flicked her tail, eyes scanning the shadows. I have to be, she replied. The forest is not safe, and neither are the paths humans take. Every step must be measured. Ethan nodded, silently agreeing. He had learned a lot from Lyra over the past days. She was fast, agile, and incredibly perceptive. In contrast, he relied on careful observation and patience. But together, they made a strange sort of team. Their uneasy alliance had grown slowly. Trust was not easy for either of them, yet they had learned to rely on each other for survival. Ethan provided knowledge of traps, edible plants, and ways to avoid predators, while Lyra guided him safely through the alien terrain, teaching him the subtle signs of danger. As they reached a shallow river, Lyra paused. Her eyes darted upstream, and her posture stiffened. Something is coming, she whispered. Ethan crouched beside her, scanning the trees. He could see nothing unusual at first, only the usual shifting shadows and distant movements. But he trusted her instincts. Lyra had been right about danger before, and her sense of it was almost supernatural. Soon, The source of her concern became clear. From the trees above, a group of mercenaries emerged. They were alien, heavily armored, and armed with energy rifles. They moved with purpose, scanning the area for movement. Ethan recognized them from his brief encounters in other parts of the forest. They were known for raiding small clans and taking captives for work or ransom. Lyra's body tensed, her tail flicking rapidly. "We cannot fight them head-on," she hissed. "We must hide. Follow me." Without hesitation, she led Ethan into a thick thicket, their movements silent and precise. Ethan admired her skill, her knowledge of the terrain. The silent ways she moved were beyond anything he had experienced. They crouched behind thick alien foliage, barely daring to breathe as the mercenaries passed by, their heavy boots crushing the underbrush. Ethan whispered, "Do you think they're looking for us?" "They're looking for my clan," Lyra replied. "If they find me first, they will know where others are." Ethan felt a chill. These were not mere predators. They were organized, dangerous, and relentless. He glanced at Lyra. She was tense, but composed, ready to act at any moment. The trust he had begun to feel toward her now deepened. He knew that his survival, and perhaps hers, depended on listening to her completely. Once the mercenaries moved out of sight, Lyra led Ethan along a narrow path high above the river. The path twisted between the trees and rocks, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. As they moved, Lyra's voice broke the tense silence. "You should know," she said softly, "that my clan has been hunted before. Many humans are cruel. Some seek only profit or power. You are not like them, but you must understand the risk." Ethan nodded. "I understand. I only want to help. If I can protect you, then I will." She looked at him, her golden eyes measuring him carefully. It is rare for a human to say such things and mean them. For the first time, a small smile crossed Ethan's face. "I suppose that makes me unusual, then." They continued their journey, the forest growing darker as the twin suns dipped toward the horizon. Shadows lengthened, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures began to stir. Lyra moved with confidence, guiding Ethan to a small clearing that overlooked a series of caves. "This will be our shelter for the night," she said. "It is high enough that they will not find us easily, and deep enough to protect us from predators." Ethan examined the area. It was well chosen. The cave entrances were narrow and hidden, with thick underbrush and rocks providing natural barriers. He realized that Lyra had been raised to survive in this environment. Her clan had trained her to read the land, the signs of danger, and the ways to remain unseen. As they settled in, Lyra approached the smaller of the two caves and began arranging a fire pit with materials she had gathered. Ethan watched, impressed by her skill. She worked quickly and efficiently, making sure the smoke was minimal to avoid detection. "You make it look easy," Ethan remarked. "It is not easy," Lyra replied. "But practice makes it possible. Survival depends on skill and patience. Human." They sat by the fire once it was lit, the small flames casting warm light on their faces. Lyra tended to her injured leg carefully, using leaves and water to cleanse the wound. Ethan helped, mimicking her movements as best he could. Their hands brushed occasionally, and though neither spoke of it, both felt the strange comfort of having someone else nearby in a world that had been so harsh and lonely. "You were right about actions," Lyra said quietly after some time. "Words are not enough. Humans often say things they do not mean, but your actions, they match your words. That is rare." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've learned that survival is not just about strength or skill. It's about knowing who you can trust and showing it in what you do." Lyra's ears twitched, and her tail moved slowly. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps I misjudged your kind. Perhaps not all humans are cruel." The night deepened, and the forest became a symphony of quiet sounds. Distant calls, rustling leaves, and the occasional snap of a twig. Lyra remained alert, yet she allowed herself moments of calm near Ethan. For his part, Ethan kept watch, scanning the shadows, ready to react to any threat. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of their pasts, of their families, and of what had brought them here. Lyra told Ethan of her clan's traditions, of the ways they learned to survive, and of the dangers of the forest. Ethan shared his own experiences, the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned about patience, observation, and the value of life. Through the conversation, an understanding began to form. Lyra realized that Ethan's presence was not a threat, and Ethan realized that Lyra's knowledge and instincts were invaluable. A fragile alliance was forming, based not on trust alone, but on mutual respect and necessity. As the hours passed, Lyra finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Leaning against a tree, with her tail curled around her legs, Ethan noticed the change, sensing that the bond between them was growing stronger. Suddenly, a faint noise from the trees above made them both tense. Ethan reached for his makeshift weapon, but Lyra held up a hand. She moved silently into the shadows, ears twitching and tail flicking. Within moments, a small group of predators, a pack of four-legged creatures with sharp teeth and glowing eyes, appeared on the path below. Lyra signaled to Ethan to stay low. Using her knowledge of the terrain, she guided him to a hidden position where the predators could not see them clearly. She whispered instructions on how to use rocks and branches to distract the creatures without harming them. Together, they executed the plan. Ethan threw small stones to divert attention while Lyra moved with precision, leading the predators away from the cave. The creatures eventually lost interest, leaving the area. Ethan exhaled, a mix of relief and admiration. "You're amazing," he said quietly. Lyra's ears twitched, and a small smile appeared on her face. "I've had practice. Survival is everything." By dawn, the danger had passed, and both were exhausted but safe. They sat together, sharing a simple meal of forest fruits and cooked protein. Lyra's tail flicked slowly, a sign of contentment and trust. Ethan realized that he had found more than an ally. Lyra had become someone whose instincts, intelligence, and courage he respected deeply. And Lyra realized that Ethan was more than a human stranger. He was someone who had proven himself in action. Someone who could be trusted when it mattered most. The forest around them was quiet now. The threat gone, but the bond they had formed was just beginning. The fragile alliance between human and Vulpine woman had been tested, and it had survived. For the first time, both felt that perhaps together, they could face whatever challenges the forest and the wider world might bring. The journey ahead would not be easy. Danger still lurked, and the mercenaries were not gone. But Ethan and Lyra knew that with careful planning, courage, and growing trust, they might just survive and maybe even thrive in this wild, alien world. For the first time in many days, they rested not as hunter and prey, but as companions. And though the forest was still filled with uncertainty, the human and the Vulpine woman had begun to learn the power of working together. A fragile alliance that might one day become something far stronger.